Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murder of Jorge Hernandez. Hernandez was shot and killed on Sunday, July 19, 2009, in the 10600 block of Wilmington Avenue in Watts, according to LA County coroner records. Aldo Arevalo and Thomas Amaya were subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. In July 2009, 16-year-old Kevin Sanchez lived in the area of 105th Street and Wilmington Avenue. Sanchez, whose moniker was Drowsy, was a member of Watts Varrio Grape Street and was affiliated with the Little Gangsters and Tiny Winos cliques. On the day of the shooting, Sanchez walked to AJ's liquor store. As he came out of the store, Sanchez noticed victim Jorge Hernandez arrive in a truck. He observed the victim drinking beer by his truck. The victim, who smelled of beer, approached Sanchez, banged on him, and asked where he was from. When Sanchez said he was from Grape, the victim responded that he too was from Grape. The victim tried to get all in Sanchez's face. He said he was Sanchez's big homie. Because Sanchez didn't know the victim, he understood the big homie comment as a sign of disrespect. When the victim called Sanchez his little homie, Sanchez denied being his little homie. The victim then got in Sanchez's face again, so Sanchez pushed him and challenged him to a fight. Because the victim refused to fight, Sanchez began to walk home on Wilmington Avenue toward 105th Street. When he arrived at the corner of 105th Street, the victim pulled up in his truck, called Sanchez little homie yet again, and said that he would be back. The victim's truck burned rubber as he left the scene. According to Sanchez, the victim was driving as if it was a freeway, and there were a lot of kids on that block. As the victim's truck passed close to defendant Amaya, who was located down the block, Sanchez saw defendant throw a beer at the truck. Sanchez then heard the victim's truck burning rubber or doing donuts in the street on the next block. Yvette Aguirre was defendant Arevalo's girlfriend. She knew defendant Arevalo by the nickname Little Knuckles and defendant Amaya by the nickname Chuco. On July 19, 2009, Aguirre owned a blue four-door Toyota Camry in which he drove defendant Arevalo to his brother's house on 105th Street near Wilmington Avenue. She parked on 105th Street, and at some point defendant Amaya joined them in her car. They were just hanging out drinking beer. Aguirre saw an SUV pull over near the corner of 105th Street and Wilmington Avenue. A man exited the vehicle and began arguing with some teenagers. The man appeared to be drunk. Defendant Amaya exited the Camry and approached the SUV. As he approached, the SUV took off. The teenagers chased the SUV and defendant Amaya threw a beer can at it. Aguirre asked defendant Arevalo what was going on because she was confused about the whole situation. She told defendant Arevalo that she wanted to leave. After defendant Amaya threw the beer, she saw him talk to the teenagers. Defendant Arevalo then exited the Camry and walked toward defendant Amaya's location. Defendants Amaya and Arevalo returned to the Camry, with defendant Arevalo taking the front passenger seat and defendant Amaya taking the rear seat. Another person, whose name Aguirre could not recall, also entered the Camry. Aguirre then drove the group to AJ's liquor store on Wilmington Avenue and pulled in front. There she saw the victim's SUV parked on the opposite side of the street. Defendant Amaya exited the Camry, followed closely by defendant Arevalo. As defendant Amaya approached the SUV, Aguirre saw Amaya extending his right arm. She could not remember whether defendant Amaya had anything on his face. Amaya approached within 3 or 4 feet of the SUV. Aguirre saw a red car arrive at the scene and then saw Amaya shooting at the SUV. After the shooting, Amaya entered the red car and left. Arevalo entered the Camry and Aguirre drove him to 105th Street, where Amaya re-entered the Camry and directed Aguirre to just get him out of there and to drive to a restaurant. As the trio sat in the restaurant, defendant Amaya stared at Aguirre, which intimidated her. Defendant Arevalo appeared pretty afraid. Aguirre thereafter drove defendant Amaya to a house and dropped them off. Thomas was talking with some people he knew in front of AJ's liquor store on the day the victim was shot. The victim was across the street from the store in his SUV. At some point, Thomas observed other cars pull up. He saw a man wearing a blue bandana exit the car and approach the victim's SUV. 2 other men exited the car along with the man in the bandana. As the man in the bandana approached the SUV with a revolver, Thomas saw the victim begin to open his door and throw up his hands in a retreating manner. Thomas heard approximately 6 gunshots. The two men who exited the vehicle with the shooter appeared shocked. Following the shooting, Thomas went to the SUV and saw the victim slumped over. In July 2009, LAPD officer Tyler Stanley was assigned to the Southeast Division. On July 19, 2009, at approximately 6:20 p.m., he and his partner were on patrol in the area of Wilmington Avenue and 103rd Street. A car pulled up beside them and reported a shooting. He and his partner made a U-turn and proceeded to the area of 107th Street and Wilmington Avenue. At that location, they observed a vehicle that was on the east side of the street up on the sidewalk, and there was a lot of commotion around it. Officer Stanley and his partner parked and approached the vehicle on foot. As they reached the vehicle, they saw that the victim was lying down inside. He was bleeding from several wounds and didn't appear to be conscious or breathing. Officer Stanley didn't notice any weapons inside the victim's vehicle. LAPD Detective Roger Fontes and his partner, Detective Mark Hand, were assigned to investigate the homicide of the victim. According to Detective Fontes, investigators recovered, amongst other things, a surveillance videotape of the area near 106th Street and Wilmington Avenue that depicted the events leading up to and including the shooting. A photograph taken from the video showed a red vehicle driving southbound on Wilmington Avenue that detectives later determined was registered to defendant Amaya. Other photographs from the video depicted the victim's vehicle parked along the east side of the street with the door open facing northbound. A different photograph from the video showed a light blue vehicle with individuals exiting the rear and front passenger doors. LA County Deputy Medical Examiner Vadim Spokins conducted the autopsy of the victim and determined that he died of multiple gunshot wounds. The victim suffered a total of 7 gunshot wounds, 4 of which were fatal, including a gunshot that entered near the victim's left ear and passed through his brain, and one that went through his left lung and heart. The victim had cocaine and alcohol in his blood, with a blood alcohol concentration of 3 times the legal limit. LAPD Sergeant Scott Stevens was familiar with Grape Street. He had investigated crimes committed by that gang and was familiar with its graffiti and writings. Grape Street controlled a specific territory that was divided among several cliques, including the Little Gangsters and the Tiny Winos. The primary activities of Grape Street were vandalism, possession and sales of narcotics, robberies, homicides, and the possession of firearms. Sergeant Stevens was familiar with defendant Arevalo and knew him to be a member of Grape Street based on numerous admissions that Arevalo had made. The sergeant was also familiar with defendant Amaya but had never met him, and understood that he was a member of Grape Street based on Amaya's various tattoos. The sergeant was familiar with Sanchez as well, and knew him to be a member of the Little Gangsters clique of Grape Street. Based on his familiarity with the case, Sergeant Stevens opined that the shooting of the victim in this case was done to enhance the reputation of Grape Street, and in response to the victim's acts of disrespect towards Grape Street and one of its members, Sanchez. Following the trial, Amaya's jury found him guilty of first-degree murder and found true the gun and gang allegations. Arevalo's jury found him guilty of second-degree murder and assault by means of force likely to produce great bodily injury, and found true the gun and gang allegations. The court sentenced Amaya to a term of 50 years to life. At a separate sentencing hearing, the court sentenced Arevalo to a term of 40 years to life. Jorge Hernandez was 30 years old at the time of death.